So when it comes to pricing, many electricians struggle with this. This is a painful thing because it's a battle between feeling like you're charging enough but not feeling like you're charging too much. It's about figuring out your value to your customers and basically kind of figuring out how much can you get away with charging them that they won't feel like they're being extorted or feel like they're getting, but they'll feel like they're getting good value. But at the same time, you're receiving due compensation for the high standard of work that you're carrying out. So in terms of pricing, how do you decide what your hourly rate is going to be? That's a question that I get asked over and over again. And there's a very simple way of working this out. And it kind of has two factors really to it. The first and most important factor is you need to know what your overheads are for your business. And you need to know how much you need to take home at the end of the day. So for example, we spoke earlier in this kind of planning stages of the business about actually knowing how much you need to take home in net profit at the end of the day in order to live the lifestyle that you want to live, to achieve your goals of running this business in the first place. So I mentioned a figure of £125 a day, but that's probably very low compared to what most people need to be able to live off on a monthly basis. So anyway, you take that figure, right? And then you work up from there. So what do you have to add on to that figure? Because if you just charge that amount to the customer, so if you say you need to earn £125 a day, right? Net profit. So if someone asks me to do a job for them, I'm going to say to them, yeah, that's fine, I charge £125 a day. No, that is not going to work. Because after you've paid all your overheads, and you've dealt with all the taxes and all that sort of stuff, you're going to end up with way less than 125 quid in your pocket. So that's what you've got to do, is build up from that figure to find out the daily figure that you need to earn when you're on site doing a job. So what can you add to that figure? Well, you need to go up from there, first of all, with tax. So depending on what tax bracket you will be on, you need to add to that so that when the tax is taken off, you end up with £125. So say before tax, it will be £150 a day, okay? Then you need to work out what your business overheads are. What do we mean by overheads? Well, what we mean is all the costs that are not directly associated with the job. So it's not your materials costs, but it's basically all the costs of running your business on a day-to-day basis. So it is, for example, the cost of running your van insurance, your van tax, your fuel. It's the cost of buying and maintaining your tools, and that kind of constant top up and turnover of tools that you need on a yearly basis. It's the cost of your insurances, the cost of your competent persons scheme registration. It's the cost of all those kind of things, your bank account fees, your accountant's fees, the list goes on and on. What you need to do is make a specific list of all your overheads, list them down, put the amount, and if they're a monthly overhead cost, then put them and times them by 12. If they're a yearly overhead cost, then just put the yearly cost. Add them all up, so you've got a yearly overhead cost, and then divide that by 12 to get your monthly cost. So that you know monthly how much your overheads are for your business. Then divide that by the number of days you're going to be working on site. So we spoke about before maybe wanting to work 4 days a week. So if we say that's 4, 8, 12, 16 days a month. So you divide your total overhead cost by the days that you're working, and that gives you your daily overhead cost. And you might find that your overhead cost could be as much as £50 a day quite easily. So then that bumps up the figure again, so then you're up to £200 a day you need to charge in order to cover your overheads, to pay your taxes, and to still end up with your daily figure that you need to earn in your pocket to live well and do what you wanted to do. But there's something else as well, because you don't want to just cover your costs and just survive. Your business needs to be profitable. So we're not just talking about you. The money that you take home, your business is a separate entity. It's two separate things. And that business itself needs to be building up cash. Not just money in, money out, nothing left at the end of the day. Because what if after a few years you need to get a new van, or you want to employ someone, and you need to buy them some tools and all the things that you need to do to employ someone? It costs money. What if work dries up a little bit for a few months and it goes quiet, but you still need to pay your wages. If you've been making no profit over the years, no money has been building up in the business, then there's a big problem because your business can just go bankrupt quite quickly because you've got nothing set aside because your business hasn't been making any profit. So you need to add a chunk of money every single day that you earn, which is pure profit for the business. And that goes into a business savings account and it builds up over the years. And then when you've got a big expense that you need to pay, you've got the money there set aside from your profits that you can plow back and invest back into the business from those business profits. So that is separate to your own life. You don't want to have to take a pay cut so that you can buy a new van, for example, or buy some new tools. You need to be able to get your own salary month in and month out and be earning profit for your business so that your business will succeed going on into the future. So it might be that, say, okay, I want to earn £100 a day profit for the business. So £300 a day is going to be my daily rate. Whatever you decide in terms of profit that you need to make on your business, that's up to you. But we're talking about high-end customers here. So in general, you state your price, and if your standard of work is good enough, they will be willing to pay it. But there are a few factors to consider about how much you can charge, and we'll talk about that next. So now from a customer point of view, we've talked about from a business point of view how much you can charge, but it could be that actually if you're charging £300 a day, customers think that that's really cheap. And just from a business point of view, you might need to charge more to meet customer expectations, because there's this weird phenomenon that happens when people are reassured when something is more expensive. They expect something to be better quality if it's more expensive. And sometimes it's nonsensical, really. It's like bottles of wine. Somebody might think that if they pay 20 quid for a bottle of wine, it's going to be better than a 10 quid bottle of wine. That's not always true. But the point is there's a psychology behind this. One customer said it to me really well. He said to me, "You are reassuringly expensive." And that really stuck with me because I thought, wow, this is amazing, reassuringly expensive. In other words, the fact that I'm charging so much, it reassures him that he's going to get a good job and a good result because he's paying top whack for it. So you might want to match your pricing with your customer expectations in terms of bringing it up a notch, even if it's more than you actually need, because you want to aim high end and you've got to have a high end pricing in order to do that. Another thing that you might find out is that people in your area are charging a lot more than you are. So for example, when I was running my previous business, one of the things that really taught me that I could charge more than I thought I could was actually I got invited to subcontract for a big national company that basically hires loads of subbies and subs the work out for them. I was doing these jobs for them and they were charging £50 per half an hour for my time. And I would go out to people and I'd do this job for an hour and a half and charge them £150 plus VAT, and they were charging a 50% markup on the materials as well. It just opened my eyes because I felt really nervous asking for that amount of money from them. But because I had this big company name behind me, it wasn't me asking for the money, it was the company, and they had chosen to hire this company, so who was I to say that it was too much? And most of the customers, this is what shocked me, most of the customers didn't even wince at paying that much. That was just what they expected to pay, and that was fine because the expectations had been met in advance. They'd been told what the pricing was, and they chose to go ahead and get the job done anyway. And it just taught me that actually I was way underpricing myself, and I was doing the job here, but if I was working for my own company right now, I would be charging less than a third of that. At the time, I think I was charging like £40 an hour or something, and I thought that was expensive, but I realised I could basically double my prices and still be cheaper than this big national company who was my competitor. So that taught me a huge lesson in actually valuing myself and not assuming that if I price myself high, I'm going to price myself out of the market. Because if people want you, they will be willing to pay whatever you ask in order for you to do the job for them. So those are the kind of factors I take into account when pricing labour. And another question that I get asked a lot is, should I price it on an hourly rate or a day rate? Some people, they say, okay, it's £50 an hour or it's £250 a day. So if you work for a whole day, you earn less than if you work for like 2 hours here and 2 hours there and 2 hours there, which for me, that doesn't really make sense. So I've always priced my day as an 8-hour period of 8 hours of hourly rate. I never reduce the rate for doing a whole day. That's just how I choose to do it, and it works. Some people say, oh, that's a bit cheeky. Surely you should charge less if you're doing a whole day somewhere. Surely you should charge a day rate. I don't have to, and nobody's ever questioned it, so why would I do anything different? Why would I undervalue myself? At the end of the day, I'm putting in 8 hours hard graft. I'm going to charge them for those 8 hours, and the customer will happily pay it. So that's my kind of take on pricing when it comes to labour. But let's talk about pricing when it comes to materials now. So when it comes to pricing materials, a lot of electricians have the question, should I just charge cost price or should I put a markup on the materials? And that's something that I wrestled with for quite a while because I was charging a high hourly rate. So I thought, well, it's only fair if I charge materials at cost price. I don't really need to put a markup on the materials. So for a while I didn't charge anything on materials. I just charged them out at the price that I paid for them to the wholesalers. But then someone brought out a very interesting point to me, which I took on board, which is the fact that there is loads of downtime involved with actually procuring materials. All those phone calls to the wholesaler, all those trips back and forth to pick stuff up, the evenings and the early mornings when you're planning the jobs and you're ordering the materials, all of that is unpaid time. And you've got to recoup the cost of that somehow. So one way of doing that is putting a markup on materials, and actually most tradespeople, it appears, do put a markup on their materials. So it's not something that customers will be surprised that if they know that you're putting a markup on the materials, it's quite common. Now of course it's up to you how much you choose to put on as your markup. For me, I chose 20% at the start. I've recently raised that to 30%. I thought that was a fair kind of figure. But as I said earlier, that big contractor who I worked for before, they put 50% on. You might choose to put 10% or 5%. That's up to you. But again, what you want to factor in is how much time does it take me to order the materials, and work that out as a percentage of your day. So in an 8-hour day of work, if you're charging 8 hours of labour, actually how many hours would you spend ordering the materials, collecting those materials? Could well be an hour of time per working day that you actually spend just sorting out the materials. So if you sort of add that on as like 1 hour out of 8, that's actually quite a high percentage. That's about 13% of the day is spent ordering and procuring materials that's not paid for. So 20% is a reasonable figure, I think, to add on top for materials. It's not so high that people will balk at it, but it's not so low that there's not any point to it. Also, it covers all your little consumables, because there's bound to be things that you don't price in on a job, like screws, raw plugs, Wago connectors, if you use earth sleeving, a few little bits and pieces that you have in the van all the time that you just top them up, but you never actually really kind of book them out to a specific job. It's not like you count 20 screws on the invoice or something like that. I mean, it would just be a waste of time to do that. But over time, all of that adds up. If you put a markup on your normal materials, then what happens is that is factored in to all the little consumables that you need to order, and it just helps you to cover your costs with all that little extra bits and pieces that you don't specifically charge to a particular job. So that's kind of the whole thought process behind my pricing of jobs. I do add as well a sundries charge to my quotes now, which is just a set figure, usually £25, and that just covers all the extra little bits and pieces, the screws, plugs and things like that, because clips, trunking, all those kind of things can add up quite quickly and cost a lot more than you might think. So that's kind of the whole thought process behind my pricing of jobs, and what we're going to do now is go on to the next step, which is where to buy materials.